There has been a lot of change lately and things are moving very quickly. So here are 5 things that I think would be good for you to learn or study up on in 2025 to be better prepared for the future. Not SHTF, not the apocalypse, but the future moving forward in this ever-changing landscape, especially related to technology, okay? So I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel, and thanks to them, I can get out here, give you this information, give you some ideas about what to prepare for, and a great place to get preparedness-related gear and equipment. So a big thanks to Midway USA for making this all possible. Now, I am personally studying up on and learning more about these 5 different topics, which is why I figured I would recommend it, because if I'm doing it, likely some of you might need to do the same, and hopefully we can all share our experience or our knowledge with each other and become a little bit more resilient to some of these issues that are facing us here in the future. Now, the first thing that I think you should learn about or study up on in 2025 is digital sovereignty. And it has a few different meanings, but basically it's your control over your personal data on the internet and how you are able to maintain and manage your privacy and security, right? And there are a lot of things that are evolving regarding digital sovereignty. But here's a couple examples of where things can go south regarding that and why you should be paying attention to it. When we just had the recent release of China's DeepSeek AI app, or when TikTok was about to be banned and everybody started jumping ship over to Rednote, which was another Chinese-controlled app. When people were doing that, they weren't thinking about digital sovereignty at all. They were just thinking about what it is they wanted to try out on the internet next, or why they wanted to give a big FU to the US government. But here's the thing. You'll say, hey, you're signing up for a foreign adversarial app that you know for a fact is logging your data and possibly stealing your information in the process and maybe using it against you in the future. And many will rebuttal, well, I think the US government does the same thing, so why do I really care? But one of the things you should consider about that exact scenario is, well, the US government does know what you're doing, and the US government knows that you're willing to do this, signing up for a publicly known Chinese controlled app that is guaranteed to be stealing your data and using it for nefarious purposes in the future. So now you're on a list of people who are more than willing to do that, more than willing to possibly sacrifice national security for own personal benefit, and might be on a list of potential foreign collaborators in the future if there's ever some sort of conflict. So that's why considering things like digital sovereignty is important. Another thing you could think about regarding digital sovereignty would be feeding AI learning models. Right now, AI is going through and trying to learn everything it can regarding information that's put out there publicly by people like myself, or by artists, or by musicians, or anybody else who has content on the internet. And so if you're not aware of how all that works, or how you can opt out of some of those things, or how you can try to at least shield yourself from the onslaught of AI trying to digest all of your content, well, you might find yourself being used in future content that's produced by AI or controlled to some degree by a foreign government that's controlling that AI. And then you might find yourself being replicated in something that is very damaging to your reputation or credibility. So these are things you need to consider now. That's why I think this is a very important topic for you to study up on in 2025, and why I think it will matter even more every single day as we move into the future. Now, the second thing, which with these gloves, we're not counting very well, but I think I got the winners here. But moving forward, the second thing you really need to study up on, at least in my opinion, and learn more about, because it's ever changing and exponentially growing in the sense of capability, is AI and machine learning, right? We all know about AI, we all understand what it's up to, and we all understand that it's like the new hotness and everything else related to that, right? But AI has a lot of negative drawbacks, of course. We're all very aware of that here in this particular, let's just say, community. But I would want you to kind of think about some things regarding AI in the sense of how can you structure things for your personal situation to benefit from AI in the future? How can you structure things to protect yourself from potential AI issues in the future? And how can you use the information you can learn now to possibly even, I don't know, profit off of it, right? But regardless, AI is very important to understand and to study right now, and there are some examples of that being problematic too. Like, for example, a lot of companies are moving over to AI-driven job screening, which means if you go apply for a job right now, there's a good chance your application is being sent through an AI integration that will then let the company know what percentage chance it is that you would be a good hire or whatever it might be, right? And unfortunately, there's a lot of flaws in that system that could lead you to not getting that job just because you didn't quite understand how AI is analyzing your resume and putting you towards the bottom rather than the top. So if you can learn more about this entire new infrastructure, you can set yourself up for success by just understanding some of those nuances and separating yourself from everybody else who has no idea about what's going on. And of course, AI can lead to things like propaganda being generated that you need to be very keen to in the sense of whether or not something is organic or artificially created before you go sharing it or believing it or anything else related to that. I know that a lot of the older generation on Facebook will react to AI generated images as if they're real and talk about them and share them. And I'm just mind blown by the fact that they think this is a real image, but that's just where we're at. So this is why it's so important for you to understand how all of this works, not to mention all of the bad content that it can put out there as well that is solely driven for the purpose of affecting your emotions, right? So you need to understand it. And I think that there are some things that we can benefit from it in the sense of maybe financially, or maybe at least in the sense of quality of life. But there are a lot of risks involved too. And since it's inevitable and there's nothing you and I can do to stop it, understanding it and being aware of every capability it has is going to give us a better way to position ourselves for that inevitability. Now, moving into another subject that is dealing directly with AI would be number 3. This time it works. Advanced robotics and automation. You should definitely be learning these topics as well. Now, I think there's a lot to learn there, especially regarding, how things are moving forward in the commercial sector as well as in the military sector. But I think the things that we could talk about here in the preparedness community that would be very interesting, at least give you some motivation for why you might want to learn more about these systems, would be the vulnerabilities there in case they ever are used against you, right? Because there are going to be vulnerabilities, but if you don't know about them or you're not pre-positioned to exploit them, then how are you going to use that information, right? So learn about the vulnerabilities of advanced robotics or automation now in case it ever gets used against you. There are things that are currently being used right now that could work in the future. Things like understanding jamming, right? And how to get rid of GPS signals and things of that nature. Or what fragile components exist within these advanced robotic systems, There are fragile components, like, for example, the power supply. What is it usually, consisting of, and what would be good to use against it? I mean, these are all considerations you can make now and actually learn about now, just in case it ever gets to that point. Not to mention flaws in AI decision-making by some of these automated devices that are autonomous, right? So if they're out and about doing bad robot stuff and you understand how their thought process works because of how AI decision-making works, well, then possibly you can use that against it in order to have a better strategy regarding what it's most likely to do. So these are all things you can definitely consider, not to mention the fact that because of the rise in advanced robotics and automation, especially in the military context, and eventually, of course, with police as well, and we already know they use, robots to deal with bombs and all kinds of stuff. So that this is already in use. It's just going to continually progress to be more and more autonomous, right? All of this will lead to the rise of like portable EMP devices and things of that nature. So that's another consideration to make, is how would that affect me in the future? How would it affect my gear selection? How would it affect the technology that I depend on out in the field or whatever it might be? And so now you have some things to start considering and moving forward with it when it comes to how you're going to protect those devices or how you're going to get things done without them, right? So like these are all things that are happening, which is why you should be looking into this. It's not just to understand what a robot is. It's to understand how you can apply it to anything that might occur in the future. Now, the 4th thing that you need to learn about, and this is for preparedness for sure, and I know a lot of people aren't really big into it, but I think it's very important for you to learn about and to understand at this point in time, is going to be blockchain and decentralized finance, okay? Now, obviously crypto is a hot topic, and right now we have a significant push for it by our current administration, which is a flag in the sense of, in my opinion, telling me to, hey, you need to really get on top of this or else you're going to be left behind. And so I think that's very important. And I think that, yes, we're all aware of what crypto is. We're all aware of the basic concepts of crypto. But how many of us are actually fully fluent in it? How many of us are actually capable of using it on a daily basis? How many of us are actually exploiting the benefits of it and figuring out how it's going to apply to our lives in the near future? Because it's very likely it's going to become part of your daily life, whether you like it or not. And so these are things that I think you could benefit from right now that could position you to be very successful in the future, but only if you're willing to put the work in now. And so Here's some very baseline examples for you. Right now, we have the capability of tokenization using blockchain. What does that mean? It means that there's more opportunities for fractional ownership of things that you used to not be able to have any fractional ownership of. So a good example of that would be real estate, right? I can't fractionally own a house right now if I just take out a mortgage, right? I'm not going to split the payment with like 10 other people and just call it a real contract, right? But with blockchain, you could actually tokenize that real estate property and then only buy fractional shares of it and then gain whatever, value it has in the future regarding, residuals and everything else. So there's a lot to it, and I'm not trying to get into the nitty-gritty of it right now, but there's a lot of reasons why it would be beneficial for you to be aware of these things, even if you don't want to participate, at least understanding what other people are doing and how things could evolve. And there are some benefits here too for the average person that might not be financially sound right now when it comes to the standard central banking system, but might be able to access the crypto system a little bit easier and have a little bit more of a fair shot. For example, decentralized finance, right, or DeFi. You could have opportunities there because if you're not bank worthy right now, you might be crypto worthy. And so what that means is individual lenders might actually lend you crypto assets in order to earn interest, right? And then you might be able to get that loan or whatever type of financing it is via the crypto assets that you currently have, which would generally be your collateral. And then through a network of smart contracts within the legal framework of how things work right now, you could technically finance something that you don't qualify for otherwise, right? And I'm not trying to tell people you should go into debt or anything like that. What I'm saying is if that you have goals and there's things you want to accomplish, but you're being held back by a bad credit score or by a lack of positioning within the central bank system, things like decentralized finance could actually allow you that opportunity that you don't have otherwise. So that's why it's so important to learn about this and try to stay on top of this information as best you can. Even if you don't plan on using it or accessing it, it is something that is there and available and might actually help people out, right? So the other thing, keep in mind, the fifth thing that I think is worth learning and studying and knowing well and having a good grasp of moving into 2025 with all of this future stuff coming our way and with all of the recent events occurring in the country, especially regarding executive orders and deportations and things of that nature, right? This is a great time and a great opportunity to really brush up on your constitutional knowledge. And the US Constitution is the fifth thing that I think you should learn and study up on in 2025. I don't have a robotic inner working of the US Constitution, just being completely honest, right? I have the basic principles of it, but I don't have enough constitutional knowledge to be overly confident in something being constitutional or not if I don't have something to reference thereafter. And that's something that I think could be problematic, especially if we ever face a collapse type scenario. For example, if you're cut off from the rest of the world, your community is all you have because the grid goes down, SHTF occurs, and all the technology stuff we just talked about stops working, and now it's just back to square one. You need a form of governance to maintain a level of order within your community. And keeping the constitutionality of what we do as a country and as a community is vitally important to being able to rebuild things into the future in that same framework. And if you don't have working knowledge of it, you might not be able to make good decisions quickly regarding how to deal with some of these potential issues during a grid down or regional disaster where things really come back down to the community level. And I think that moving into this technological space, even with all these different things, the digital sovereignty, the AI, the advanced robotics, the blockchain, and everything else related to it, having that really strong constitutional foundation will allow you to better understand what is or is not right before you make a decision. And it's not just important for you to know your rights, it's important for you to know other people's rights as well. So that way, what you're doing is constitutional because you can violate the Constitution by violating someone else's rights just as much as they can violate it by violating yours. So these are important concepts that I think we should really immerse ourselves in and really have a better understanding of. And like I said, this is me personally saying that these are the subjects that I'm going to be kind of deep diving into this year in order to have a better understanding of what's happening. And I figure if I'm doing it, then somebody else might need to too. Just wanted to share this with you and give you some things to consider. Anything else you need from me, I'll go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.